Good afternoon and welcome to the Smart Alerts Spotlight webinar brought to you by TraceGains. My name is Matthew Passananti and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at TraceGains. Together with our software sales engineer, Reuben Galbraith, we'll provide you with an introduction to Smart Alerts. Before we do that, I'd like to take a minute to introduce you to TraceGains. We offer a cloud-based supplier relationship management platform that helps food, supplement, and consumer packaged goods companies deliver on their brand promise. We have wonderful people in quality, regulatory compliance, procurement, and R&D that rely on TraceGains to help them bring quality products to market faster. With our solutions, we turn static documents into digital records, we track the information exchange, and we automate the associated workflow and collaboration. Through TraceGains Network, thousands of supplier locations are available to manufacturers and brand owners to collaborate with one another. They can source and qualify new vendors, procure ingredients, and build and reformulate recipes. They can even negotiate ingredient specifications and automatically collect supporting documentation from a growing and centralized industry library. On average, our customers find that about 75% of their suppliers are already on TraceGains Network. This allows them to connect with their suppliers, immediately begin collaborating, and with instant information sharing and visibility throughout the supply chain, companies can manage risk, they can grow their business, and they can go faster. Today, we'll be providing an introduction to Smart Alerts from TraceGains. Smart Alerts is an add-on to our supplier management module and enables companies to monitor threats and regulatory risk within their supply chain in real time. Most importantly, we'll connect these alerts to the items and ingredients that matter most to your organization. We'll begin with a brief discussion on supply chain risk. Then, we'll talk about the most common challenges customers are facing as they try to minimize this risk. We'll then discuss current approaches companies in the food, supplement, and consumer packaged goods industries are taking to identify, validate, and action external sources of risk data. We'll even share some of the impacts that accompany these decisions. We'll then discuss how Smart Alerts from TraceGains is your best source for staying on top of safety, incident, and fraud information capable of compromising your supply chain. We'll discuss the data sources we connect with, and end with a solution demo followed by a question and answer session before we wrap up today's webinar. We recently surveyed our customer base of brand manufacturers and suppliers and found that the majority of challenges they face are all derived from the same problem. As it turns out, 80% of the data required to run their business resides within the global supply chain. When it comes to managing supply chain risk, these critical data sources exist solely outside of the organization. Though quality control is of the utmost importance to almost every company, no amount of quality control can protect your organization from supply chain risk. All companies need to take the necessary steps to ensure the safety of items that enter their inventory. If you use compromised items to produce your products, the consequences can be severe. You can stop production, waste valuable resourcing time, or dramatically damage your brand through a recall or negative publicity. We established Smart Alerts to help solve many of the common challenges our customers in the food, supplement, and consumer packaged goods industries were facing in obtaining information from these external data sources. As they qualify, connect to, and collaborate with their suppliers to source the right items, the quality of products they can produce is mainly dependent upon the quality of the raw materials, items, and ingredients provided by their suppliers. Because of this, it is imperative to understand the risks involved in selecting your suppliers, their locations, and their raw materials. Here are some of the most common challenges we see in the market today. To begin, every company that participates in contributing to or sourcing from the global food supply chain has to be aware of common dangers such as economically motivated adulteration, fraud, or other incidents that can occur without warning, like higher levels of pesticides and heavy metals. We have an increasingly global supply chain, and that makes it increasingly difficult to identify the bad actors with the intent to put the safety, quality, and traceability of your supply chain at risk. Manually reviewing a myriad of external data sources to uncover relevant issues, or periodically checking in on the status of relevant regulations, is slow and allows problems to go undetected for long periods of time. If you want to take the information you gather and cross-check it against your suppliers, their locations, or even specific ingredient categories, you'll be required to spend a significant amount of time on those efforts. And finally, maintaining compliance with FSMA forces buyers to continually monitor their suppliers and ingredients for risk, while also tracking reported events throughout the supply chain. If you happen to be experiencing these challenges, it may be that your business is a perfect candidate for smart alerts. With smart alerts from TraceGains, we can not only solve these problems, but we can streamline your risk management processes as well. The problems we are bringing to light are simply symptoms of inefficient processes employed by businesses throughout the food supply chain. If you're managing supply chain risk for your organization, you're likely spending your days buried in manual tasks. Many companies use a search engine like Google to source ingredients. It's a logical step to think, why not use this to manage our supply chain risk as well? You set up Google Alerts with keywords for your suppliers, their ingredients, and the countries from which they're sourced. The problem is that Google Alerts weren't designed to detect supply chain risks such as fraud or allergens. Even though Google may provide you with an alert, you still need to spend the time investigating the alert to determine its validity and severity. Maybe you're spending your time sifting through trade associations or industry outlets to find the needed information. These sources do a very good job of reporting regulatory issues like Prop 65 and EU bans on specific substances. However, the problem with these sources is that they don't do a very good job of reporting on regulatory issues in a timely fashion. In general, this information is reactive, not proactive, and often not as immediate as companies would like. One other source you may be looking at is a paid database where you can see food incidents and regulatory statuses. Though this information may be really helpful, the main problem with this tool is that they offer a proprietary application or website from which to obtain this information. Though you may have the information you're looking for, you need to spend time to manually reconcile what you've learned with what you're doing. The common problems you may be experiencing in trying to manage your supply chain in such a manual fashion is that the information is disparate and not actionable. You either have to sift through hundreds of alerts in your email box, scour trade associations and industry outlets, or reconcile data from proprietary applications before you can even begin to synthesize this data and glean any drop of value. What you need is an automated solution that obtains the data for you on a daily basis. It reconciles it against the suppliers, their locations, and ingredients that matter most to you and your business. It also integrates that data into your existing systems, exposing it alongside the supply chain data you already use. You need a comprehensive and automated solution to manage supply chain risk, and that's exactly what TraceGains is offering with Smart Alerts. Smart Alerts from TraceGains is your best source for regulatory, safety, incident, and fraud information in the food, supplement, and CPG industries. It integrates seamlessly into both Supplier Management and Market Hub, and establishes itself as a real-time, single source of truth for all of your risk-based research and monitoring needs. With Smart Alerts, you can pinpoint risk by ingredient, additive, flavoring, substance, contamination source, and more. You can research by commodity, country of origin, and threat type, among others. Smart Alerts is a great tool for preparing or updating your food safety plan because it helps you to eliminate those known or reasonably foreseeable hazards. Staying current is simple with automatic alerts for your approved suppliers, their items, ingredients, and formulas, as well as daily system updates on new and emerging issues. Customers utilize Smart Alerts to manage their supply chain risk, but in reality, they get to do so much more. Many customers are accelerating new product development with faster ingredient research and supplier approval through a single user interface. They're pinpointing risks and trends for ingredient attributes such as additives, nutrition, flavoring substances, food safety, emerging science, and more. They're obtaining immediate access to ingredient equivalencies offered by alternative suppliers. And our customers can set automatic alerts for key ingredients to stay on top of issues and regulatory status changes for the markets that impact their distribution. And finally, when integrated with other TraceGains solutions, companies can continuously monitor and manage supply chain risk from a single system. Smart Alerts from TraceGains is powered by centralizing research and data from hundreds of industry data sources. It's your best option for obtaining regulatory, safety, incident, and fraud information on a daily basis. Smart Alerts not only monitors global and domestic problems like fraud, adulteration, and import refusals, but it also includes advisories and warnings, regulatory status, and adverse incident reports as well. Here, you'll see a brief summary of some of the most active data sources included within the Smart Alerts library. At this point in our presentation, I'd like to bring in Reuben Galbraith, our software sales engineer, to provide a demo covering many of the scenarios we've spoken about today.
So I'm going to start us right here on the Smart Alerts homepage, where we have a whole bunch of different options for diving deep into all the available data. I'm going to save this search, which is right up top, for very last, where we're going to go through a real use case. So let me scroll down just a little bit here where we have a few opening charts. At left, we've got a global heat map of recent warnings. At right, we have a snapshot of a few particular ingredients garnering negative attention. I worry about anyone who was eating dried figs last November. And while these may or may not reflect your actual supply chain, they're kind of speaking to the module's real-time data collection capabilities. And I also wanted to show these up front because a few steps down the road, we're going to show how you get kind of a custom global map that's particular to only the ingredients you're considering sourcing or already buying. All right, I'm going to keep us scrolling down a little bit here into the page. And here's where we're starting to get our first real glimpse at the live warning database we're keeping up to date for all those automated processes. So sources include, but are not limited to, the FDA, the Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed, RASFF. Both of those contain import refusals and alerts. We also have a large set of warning and regulatory databases covering Prop 65, adulteration, historical usage of ingredients, and a whole lot more. So essentially, rather than scanning multiple websites, we're compiling these in one spot. And we're actually getting a pretty healthy blend of those right here. We got something on vitamin D3 that's an import alert, something about peppers from Turkey that was an import rejection, another just bit of information around a parasitic infestation, look out for that, on frozen cod fillets from China. A nice little blend. At right, and I wanted to make sure to not skip over this part because it's so essential, we get a glimpse here as to how all these different issues from all these different databases are mapped to our detailed and proprietary smart ingredient taxonomy. This taxonomy is massive. It actually spans over 40,000 different unique entries there, which is pretty essential. This means that you can find details on not just the exact ingredient you're using, but also be alerted to certain tangential information. Like, who knows, let's say you're buying a certain ingredient like aloe, but there was a warning alert out there for aloe leaf extract in a particular form. You'd want to know about that as well because that's interesting information to you. It helps build out that risk profile. All right, so enough touring around this opening page here. Let's get into a real use case. So why don't we do a little bit of pretending here. Let's say we're doing some new product development. We're going to be onboarding a brand new ingredient. We've never worked with it before, and our job is to assess any risks. And this means that we can move forward properly with procurement, maybe writing out a safety plan for how we're going to handle that ingredient. Any number of things can happen from this research. Now, for demo's sake, I'm going to pick a really simple ingredient, garlic, type that into our search box here, and hit enter. And what's going to pull up here is the list of ingredients from our taxonomy. I think it's going to narrow it down to give or take around 50 different versions of garlic that we have in here. Give it 1 second to load up here in the background. There we go. So 56 different entries for garlic. And there's a lot of ways we can kind of parse through this. Like we might want to click on botanicals and only look on that version of the ingredient. Maybe we know we're buying this as a food ingredient, and maybe we're really specific. We're looking for a fruit and vegetable juice. But since garlic bulb juice or drink sounds completely disgusting, for demo's sake, why don't we just look at all the food ingredients, sort out this table to look at those that have some interesting warnings and regulatory info, and click on into the entry for garlic bulb itself. So here we are. We landed in kind of the first of the 3 tabs for this garlic bulb entry in the Smart Alerts module. The very first one, naturally, is an overview. It gives us an understanding as to what this ingredient is. We have a nice little opening paragraph here. We see just below this opening paragraph a little mapping to where it falls in the taxonomy. And then this part here to the right is really interesting. It's our first glimpse at how this is a network-connected piece of our trace gains technologies. So we have a little listing here that says, are we already sourcing this ingredient and tracking it via the supplier management module? And in this case, we are. It looks like we're buying it from Basic Ingredients Green Bay, and there it is, garlic from Basic Ingredients. It also gives us a little bit of an inkling towards maybe whether or not we're already doing some upfront sourcing work in Market Hub. If we hadn't had a source of it yet, and we hadn't been doing any Market Hub research yet, we could actually, with one click, hop into that area of the product and see out of the, 10,000 different supplier groups in our system, who's selling garlic. Now, before I get any deeper in Smart Alerts, I actually thought that would be a fun little aside. So what I did is I pulled up over here in our little search window of Market Hub. I typed in garlic, and I found that there was 3,000 different ingredients in our system. That's 3,000 of the 250,000 or so grand total. And as you can see by this global map, there's quite a few here in the U.S. No shock, they're kind of centered around California. But if I scrolled over here to Asia, I'd probably see a whole bunch of other entries as well in China, Vietnam, Philippines, and so on. Those are loading up as we speak. And if I want to really get into the nitty-gritty details on those ingredients, I could toggle over to this view, see where these ingredients are coming from, even download documentation, allergen statements, country of origin, COAs, nutrition forms, et cetera, et cetera. So a pretty neat way. Think about how you'd be tying together your upfront research with the actual sourcing of the ingredient going back and forth. So what else do we have here? Let's get a little bit deeper into the Smart Alerts area and start to investigate some of those warnings and regulatory pieces. So I'm going to click over here into the Warnings tab, and we kind of have like a two-part layout here. We have this global map, obviously centered around Europe in this case, and then just below the fold we have a table that's naturally sorted to show off the most recent information tabulated by us. So here we have a little date column here going back to April 2019, October 2018, and a little bit further back. And we're seeing the title of the different warnings or alerts that came in. We see whether or not they're related to a particular product or company or certain country, what the source was. All these things we can actually toggle around and find just the information we're looking for. So for example, if I didn't want to look at everything under the sun and I was just caring about import rejections for the day, I could make that choice. It would update the table below, it would update the map above, and of course we could do any further research by clicking into this link to see the full details, or hovering over this map icon to see exactly where this one occurred. So there is a lot of different things we can kind of do with this information. Maybe this is starting to guide our procurement team to source from a certain area to avoid a different one, or maybe based off of the warnings we're starting to see down here, it would change our safety plan. Maybe we're going to emphasize a certain tier of microbial testing on these ingredients to make sure they don't have salmonella or whatever it may be. All right, final tab of this little flow here. I'm going to get over to the regulatory zone. So this area here is a little bit more of a historic perspective to be contrasted with kind of like the more up-to-date information that's in the warning zone. So let me give the lay of the land here. We have a table, of course. The first two columns speak about which regulation is of concern and what country that's based out of. Then the right two columns say what's the status for garlic bulb. If it's listed there, it would be in the direct match column. Or for related matches, things nearby in the taxonomy tree. And we kind of have a good prime example of that right up front. Nothing around here around herbs of commerce or pre-Dechet industry trade group listings, but apparently around grass affirmations, garlic bulb has one listed there, as does garlic bulb extract, extract oil, extract essential oil, oleoresin. Each of these things here, by the way, that are links we could dive into and investigate further. So for example, if we wanted to see why a certain company put in an NDI submission for garlic, I could click on this link and through our partnership with APA, actually track down all those documents and even see the back and forth with the FDA. So I imagine there's some inquisitive eyes looking around this page here saying, all right, how many regulations are in this database currently? Where are they focused on? And what you'll see here is that we have about 15 different ones or so, and they are largely domestic focused. That's because that's where most of our customers are, of course. But we are rapidly developing this out and adding new ones almost by the week. So here we have, right at the bottom, just by sorting order, we have some from the European Union, World Health Organization, and so forth. I had to look this acronym up earlier. It's the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives. So if any ingredient is listed in that database, we'll have it cataloged in here as well. So that was all really fun. We did a lot of upfront research on this ingredient. But a lot of things I've been saying and Dana was speaking to earlier were around staying up to date on this. So good, we did our upfront garlic bulb research and are happy moving forward with procurement. But what if something happens in 2 weeks or in 3 months? What you're going to want to do is use this little hamburger menu area to add this to your set of up-to-date alerts. The moment you do that, it becomes added onto this alerts page over here. So who remembers that graph from a little bit earlier where we saw every warning under the sun across the globe? This is an area where you're actually tying it to only the ingredients you're sourcing or the ones you're caring about. So this map here that seems to be spanning the globe is warnings for vitamin C, which apparently this mock company is sourcing. A little bit below in the fold, we're sourcing ginger, ground, in a craft spice version. We can decide right up here using this Edit Smart Alerts kind of dialog which things we want to have showing up in the map. We want to see which ones might give us active alerts. We could get rid of them if we feel comfortable with an ingredient and don't want to be alerted about it at all. Those are all things we can handle right here on the fly. So what I'm going to do next here, though, is I'm going to jump over to our second use case of the day. And don't worry, it's actually our final use case of the day. Then we'll move on to the Q&A section. But what I really want to get into is how we're connected to some of our other modules, in particular the supplier management module. And for anyone who's been using that already, you're probably scanning this top area of the product saying, oh yeah, I recognize a lot of these tabs. When I log into TraceGains, I have reports, I have a supplier area, and I have an item supplied area that lists out all the ingredients that I'm currently buying or at least qualifying. And for anyone who's not currently using TraceGains, I'll give a little bit of the basics here as well. We're in the item supplied tab, which means we're looking at dashboards where the table represents an ingredient from a company we're buying, an ingredient from a particular location of a company we're buying from, and some of just the most basic information. Is it approved or not? That's probably based off of whether or not we've collected up all the documents we want. We want to see all the details on the ingredient provided by the supplier. We could click into that record or use one of these dashboards to drill into even more specific details around, let's say, what allergens are present, whether something's organic, what country it's coming from, all information that TraceGains is automatically collecting and has been doing so for around 10 years. But for this example here, let's pretend we want to follow, our supply chain and keep an eye on all the nascent supply chain risks. How would you do that? You'd have a dashboard that would be aptly named the Smart Alerts Dashboard. So here we are on this page, and it's the same sort of view. We have a listing of our ingredients by each company, but off to the right, you're going to notice some brand new columns. We have this tied to Smart Alerts where we're showing off the most recent warning date, total warnings over time, and if there were any particular recent warnings here. So in this case, what bubbles up to the top are the ingredients that we're buying that have had kind of recent situations. Fortunately, nothing in 2020 so far, but if we look back at vitamin C, ginger root, calcium carbonate, we see that there were a few situations going back to 2019. So how would we investigate that? How would we act on this information? What I'm going to do is I'm going to click into this record here, and what I see is the trace station view of all the information we've collected in the system. And like I said, the vast majority of it has come from the supplier. For example, at the very bottom of the page, we see all the documents that are automatically vacuumed up, automatically kept up to date to make your whole supply chain management a whole lot more simple. But in this case, we're talking Smart Alerts, and you might have noticed here in this left column, we have a little Smart Alerts section. If I expanded it here by clicking on Warnings, I can see how I tied this ingredient from Kenshi herb to our Smart Alerts area. So here it is, ginger rhizome root, ginger root. There's that last warning date, some information about all the warnings over time. If I clicked on this link here, it's going to pop us back over to that Smart Alerts area we were in just a moment ago. So remember some of these areas we were looking at before? We can say, yes, supplier management connections, we're buying it from Kenshire. I knew that information. We could see if we were sourcing it from anyone else. We could see exactly where ginger falls in the taxonomy, and this is a particularly interesting area because this one shows off the depth of it. We have ginger, root, extract, and hydroethanolic form as a specific entry. And if I scroll down just a little bit lower in the page, I would see a listing of those most recent warnings that were flagged in that dashboard. So here we have that one from October. Apparently there was an import rejection out of India. And if I want to look a little bit further into this, I would click on this linked text, and it would bring me to that full information. Now, it's kind of up to you how you would use this. It says that what was going on, it seemed to be related to salmonella. It was related to a particular manufacturer. We've got their address and the name of their actual ingredient. So maybe we're not working with them and we're not worried at all. Or maybe we want to take this info and say we're going to change our testing plan for any ginger we're bringing in from an international location. Let's be preemptive in our safety program and always be testing for salmonella, maybe even triple testing on it there. So that's kind of like the general idea around smart alerts. And I'm going to pull us back to the home page here. The idea is that you can look at the information up front, do that research. You can be alerted about the ingredients that you're already using or considering using so you stay up to date. And the whole name of the game is efficiency. We don't want you digging around in that haystack looking for the needle. We want to present that needle right there to you and give you the options to take that needle and act on it. In this case, maybe if you'd found that real issue of ginger and didn't want to be using it anymore, you could have gone right back over to that item supplied area and said, I'm going to toggle this ingredient off of my approved list, and I'm going to change its status and say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable buying in this anymore because of all of those different issues. So giving you the information you need so you can act on it, make your supply chain as safe as possible. So I'm going to pull back there. That was a pretty good tour, I hope, but I'd love to hear any questions.
Thank you, Reuben. In today's presentation, you learned how smart alerts from TraceGains enables companies to monitor threats and regulatory risk within their supply chain in real time. Today you learned how TraceGains offers an integrated monitoring solution complete with risk, ingredient sourcing, and supplier management capabilities. You saw firsthand how automated alerts can be configured to immediately notify you of supply chain risk and regulatory updates. You learned how to properly track ingredient innovation by conducting ingredient research and identifying the right suppliers for your next product. With Smart Alerts, you learned that you can expedite compliance checks to speed up go, no-go assessments on materials, ingredients, and recipes in order to get products to market faster. You witness fast and accurate regulatory research that eliminates time spent tracking down regulations and ingredient requirements. All this by using tools that speed up the process and increase the accuracy of compliance assessments. And finally, you were shown how to manage regulatory shifts by proactively updating necessary product development, quality, and supply chain processes. On behalf of myself, Reuben, and everyone else here at TraceGains, I'd like to thank you for your time, and now we'll open up the conference for questions. Our first question today is, what is involved if I want to add smart alerts to my supplier management implementation? I'll go ahead and answer that one. If you're interested, let us know, and we'll go ahead and get you connected with your account executive here at TraceGains. For customers who are already utilizing supplier management, the process is tremendously simple. We'll have a customer success manager go into your back office of supplier management and flip a switch and turn on smart alerts. Your customer success manager will then give you a call and talk you through the different internal workflows that you have in your organization. And this really helps us to understand what information should be presentable to what individuals and at what time. And we'll make sure that your user-defined dashboards is configurable for the way you want to see it. We have a second question from Robbie. Robbie asks, can you create a Smart Alerts dashboard for your Suppliers tab so you can report upon Smart Alerts by supplier?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. It's not something I've tried doing myself, but I believe you could. What it would take, I think, is just one or two derived attributes. For any of the folks who have gotten deep into TraceGains, you may have touched these. What it does is it takes that information that's tied to, let's say, something a little bit disjoint, like the ingredient you're buying from a supplier, and then calculate something over in the supplier zone for you. So for example, if that little dashboard we saw that there was 10 alerts on that ginger, maybe that would roll over into the suppliers tab. Maybe it would be color-coded in red. You would just need to set up like the business rules that make all of that happen. But the bigger part of that question is like, what can we do with this info? Can it go into our supplier risk dashboard? Can it go into our supplier scorecarding dashboard? And the answer overall is yes. We love people to use it that way. We want this to be connected to like your overall supply chain decisions, not just around what ingredient should I stop sourcing from this country. We want it to kind of feed into, should I be using this supplier at all? Could I resource from somebody else? So I'll give a broad answer of yes there, but it would take a little bit of technical work in there, which I'm sure your CSM would be happy to help you with.
Tammy asks, is there a list of regulatory bodies where these alerts are gathered from that can be provided up front?
Yes, there is. I think it's actually not a slide we ended up putting in our presentation. We have a nice long list of those. Maybe before we blast out the presentation, we could add that slide back in. We're happy to share it. And the only thing I'd add too is that while that list has like 25 different databases or so and different taxonomies we're hooking into, it's something that's growing. So like I said, every few weeks we're finding a new database worth adding, sometimes doing it by popular demand. So don't feel like it's a snapshot in time and everything else keeps growing. But yeah, let's add that back to the PowerPoint, Caleb, before we launch it out.
Tammy asks, is there a list of regulatory bodies where these alerts are garnered from that can be provided up front? You know, we really are committed to continuous improvement here at TraceGains. We work with many other organizations, including researchers and academia, where we're looking to obtain resources that you won't find anywhere else. And we're not just scraping websites, we actually have human analysts involved in presenting the information to you. Rachel has a question. The warnings aren't supplier specific. Just to confirm, they are warnings for specific ingredients?
That's a really good question. I should have lingered on that table of all the warnings under the sun for a little bit longer. There actually is a column on there that when a supplier is identified in the warning or the import refusal, we absolutely catalog their name in there. But as you may know from doing this type of research, not every type of alert relates to a particular supplier. So it's a blend. When we have one there, we identify it and kind of tag it as such. Sometimes it even relates to multiple suppliers. There's a whole lot of different situations. So yeah, my answer is when available, we do tie it to a specific supplier or country or region or whatever it may be, whatever info is available for us.
Ian has a question. Ian, thank you for being with us today. Ian asks, with Smart Alerts being a newer system, how far back does it report fraud or food safety issues? If a supplier had an incident back in 2015, is that still valid and will it be included?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so if you logged in today, it wouldn't just have from like November 2018 on forward. So many of these different lists out there have information listed all the way back to, who knows, even like the 80s or so. So any information source that we're importing, we're grabbing both the new stuff and as far back as we can that's been kind of made available to us. So many of the databases go back 10, 20, 30 years or so. So in this case, 2015, I'm almost sure, since that's kind of in the internet age where people are publishing these out online, we would have cataloged that information as well. It's a little different, though, depending on which list. Some people have it back 10 years, 20, 30, so there's some changes in there.
James has a question. He asks, are there alerts for pet foods?
Ooh, I think so. That might be something I have to double check on. My answer is probably yes, because as you may know, out of our big set of 400 TraceGains customers, we have a pretty big contingent that make pet foods and buy ingredients that go into pet foods. And as you know, many of the ingredients are actually shared. All these different grains and salmons and proteins and meats, they're actually not terribly different than what's going into a lot of our human foods. So I guess the spot that I'd need to investigate is where we're looking at like pet food retail products and tracking on those. So that might be something we need to follow up on. But for the ingredients that are going in there, we're really tracking those in just the same way. It's actually funny. Some of the pet foods we've spoken to speak to how the regulations are stricter, and it's almost more likely your pet food is going to be safer than your human food, which is good because my cat deserves such things.
Loretta asks, can you search for supplier locations?
I'm not sure of the answer to that one. I might have to track down the information on that. We do have it down to the supplier location level. I know that much, and we saw, I think, an example of that in the demo, but I'm not sure so much around that acts of God question piece. So I might need a little bit more details on that and to track down some info on it. Sorry.
Robert's question is, we notice the alerts are all for imports. Do you cover recalls at all? The answer there is that recalls are definitely on the roadmap for additional data sources that we plan to incorporate in the near future. So stay tuned. At this time, we have no further questions. So before we leave, I'd just like to remind everyone that we have a new podcast out now with our CEO, Gary Nowacki. It's called C2C, or Conception to Consumption. And in this podcast, Gary speaks with thought leaders and industry leaders on the food, beverage, and consumer packaged goods industries about new product development and industry trends. You can find this podcast in any streaming service of your choice. From all of us at TraceGains, I'd like to thank you and have a nice day.